next up, let's see what we can do with our sticks. A large stick and a smaller, thinner stick. Now, this isn't necessary, but I have this piece of sandpaper here, and I'd like to make this stick a little bit smoother. So I'm going to begin just by sanding the end of this stick. And you can see all the debris that's coming off of it. We'll deal with that later. And I'm mostly only going to sand the tip down here where I'll be carving and using part of it as my drawing end. And then also down by the handle, because I'm going to hold it down here way far away from my drawing end, and I want this to be a little more comfortable for me to hold. Right now it has kind of a rough texture that feels kind of nice, but wouldn't be terribly pleasant to hold over the long run. There, much better, much nicer to hold. All right, I'm gonna just clean off my workspace here a bit. Okay. All right, now that it's back to being relatively clean, let's do a little bit of carving. So I want the end of this to be able to have a nice pointed nib for drawing. It's already filed at a bit of an angle, but I'd like to make it a little bit steeper and really almost into a point so that I can get a more precise line. So I'm going to begin by using this really sharp knife and just whittling away, rotating the stick as I whittle. So you can see it's already taking some of the bark away and getting it into something closer to a point instead of an angle. I want to make it something like the tip of a pencil, but not quite as fine, not quite as pointed. And because this is an exceptionally long drawing tool, I'll be standing a little further away from the paper as I use it. And that's actually going to give me less control over the quality of line that I make, which can produce some really surprising results. Oh, look at that. I accidentally got a two-pronged tip on here, but I think I really like it. So I'm going to keep it, even though it wasn't originally my plan. Once again, just cleaning off the workspace a little bit here. I'll grab my drawing brush. There we go. Just a bit cleaner. Now, remember how long this is. I'm going to dip the tip, or I guess tips should I say, since it is kind of a pronged tip, into the India ink. This will be interesting. Who knows how it'll turn out. So I have ink on the tip, on this prong tip, and I'll make my first line. Oh, that's nice. So I'm making two lines at once that always remain parallel. Very satisfying, and look how different those marks are than any of the other marks we've made previously. Beautiful. And the surface isn't quite as porous. It doesn't hold ink the same way that the feather does, so we have to reapply the ink pretty frequently. But look, you can get a fair few marks out of that. Very nice. What a great unexpected surprise, that two-prong tip. We'll set this aside for now, and I'm going to grab my smaller twig here. I'm going to take that same piece of sandpaper, make it a little smaller so I have more control over it, and very gently I'm going to sand the tip of this tiny little stick. And if part breaks off, you don't have to have anxiety about it. you get a nice long stick. You can just use the rest of it. Here we go, just sanding off the end there. So there's no bark on my drawing end. Nice. I'm gonna do the same down here, again, just so it's a little more pleasant to hold. All right, that feels nice and smooth. Yeah, I wouldn't mind holding that for the course of a whole drawing. Kind of like a magic wand too. Now, even though the end of this is pretty fine, pretty small, it's also a little blunt. Now that could be good for, say, making dots. But I think I want to think about this as another kind of more pointed tool. So after I get the excess India ink off of the end, that does look quite nice though, I am going to gently, gently, gently file this into a point. It's a little hard, because this wood is actually a little damp. If you get wood that has been out in the rain, you might find that it's a little harder to carve just because it's so soft. You have to be so gentle. There we go. See, just had a bit more of a point than before. That's also exposing that soft porous wood on the inside, so I'm willing to bet that it will now hold a little bit more ink. Let's find out. I'm gonna dip it and swirl it in the India ink, let it soak up a little bit so there's a bit of a reservoir there of ink. Oh, and what a different mark than before. It does hold a bit more ink. That's nice. So many different kinds of mark making possibilities with just these few tools already. All right, now let's get into some slightly more complicated tools, but still of the drawing variety.